Hi, welcome back to my story time with Nana. I have a whole new story for you. Penelope is going to hear a great grandma tale tonight. I can't wait. Let's begin. Grandma Tales. Miss Lucev. Penelope walked around the gray manor carrying her bouquet of paper flowers, looking for a story. Everyone was outside in the courtyard this day. It was unseasonably warm for December. There was a woman sitting next to the pond watching a couple of geese swimming. She was putting pieces of corn and seed close to the edge of the pond. Hi, Penelope said, walking towards her. The woman turned and smiled. Well, hello, Penelope. How did you know who I am? Oh, everyone knows you, Penelope. You're the little girl selling flowers for a story. My name is Mrs. Lucev. Would you like to hear my story? I would, she answered. Do you have a story from when you were little? Well, I was sitting here thinking about just that. I was thinking about when I was a little girl and my family moved from New York City to a small city called Franklin Square on Long Island. It was mostly farmland at that time. We didn't have any cows or horses, but we had some chickens and a goat named Thomasina. It was different moving from the city to the country. I loved it. Anyway, I was just thinking about how I walked to school. It wasn't very far, maybe a mile or so. I didn't know anyone yet, so I walked to school alone. Now, I didn't mind walking alone. It gave me time to think about last night's assignments and hoping I got it all right. I loved my teacher, Miss Martin. She was so pretty and nice. I always wanted to please her. She always made me feel important and that my questions were very good questions. She would say to me, "That's a good question, Anne." And I would feel so smart. Even though I loved Miss Martin and being in school, this story is really about my walk to and from school. Now, during the fall and winter, my walk to and from school was pretty much uneventful. But come spring, that all changed. I had been walking to and from school the entire year alone. I could see other children walking to school. Some were ahead of me, some behind me, some even across the street. Still, I walked by myself, which I already said I didn't mind. I guess you could call me a loner. On the first day after Easter break, I was walking to school just like every other time before. I got about halfway there when I heard a loud squawk behind me. It was a goose, a big goose, and it was waddling towards me. Now, at first, I just started walking a little faster, but the goose was getting closer and squawking more. Soon it was running after me, so I began running. I ran the rest of the way to school, and that goose ran almost the whole way right after me. What in the world was that all about, I wondered. By the time I got into class, I forgot all the very good questions I had for Miss Martin. Now, the school day went by quickly, as they always did for me. I loved being there. And after a short while, I forgot all about the squawking goose. And soon the bell rang. Time to go home! Time to go home! Everyone put away their notebooks, and I started my usual route home. It seemed that the goose, though, hadn't forgotten about me. I got to the same spot that the goose started chasing me earlier, and suddenly she came flying out of the bushes at me, squawking and flapping her wings. It was as if she was yelling at me. She chased me all the way home. I ran into the house, slamming the door. My mother yelled at me first for running in the house and then second for slamming the door. I tried to explain that I had been nearly killed by the biggest goose ever, but she didn't want to hear it. We were civilized people that did not run through the house and most certainly did not slam doors. We closed them properly, she told me. I said I was sorry, but of course I really wasn't sorry. I was scared when I came running into the house, and well, slamming the door was just to make sure the goose didn't follow me in. As far as I was concerned, I had just saved my whole family's life. I tried to tell my family about the giant goose at dinner, but they weren't really interested. It's just a goose, my mother told me, waving her hand. I'm fairly certain that that night I dreamed I was being chased by giant geese, a whole bunch of them. The next morning I started again on my usual path to school, and sure enough, that goose came flying out of the bushes and began chasing me again. I tried to act tough and I yelled back at the goose, but that just made her madder, and it seemed faster. So once again, I ran all the way to school. I didn't say anything to anyone because, well, quite frankly, who would believe me? When the bell rang at the end of the day, I decided that instead of my normal route, I would cross the street before getting to that goose's favorite bush. I felt confident that if I stayed away from the killer goose's bush, I would be fine. Oh no, that goose heard me coming. It was as if the goose had had a watch on and knew what time I'd be passing by. She came busting out of that bush, squawking and flapping her wings right at me. I was across the street. What in the world did the goose have against me? I ran like the wind the rest of the way home and tried very hard not to slam the door when I came in. My mother still had to tell me to slow down when I came in the house. Now this went on for a little over a week, and finally I asked Miss Martin why a goose would chase me. Was I wearing a color that made her mad? No, Miss Martin told me. Was it how I smelled? No, Miss Martin told me. Is she hungry? No, Miss Martin said. Well, what was it? Miss Martin told me that this was mating season and she was probably protecting her nest. She explained that geese set up a nest and both the mother and father protect the nest. She said it could be that the mommy goose was sitting on the nest and the daddy goose was just trying to keep his family safe. Well, I didn't understand. I wasn't going to do anything to their nests. Miss Martin said it didn't matter because the goose did not know that. They just know they have to keep their nests safe from anyone. Well, they were doing a good job of protecting that nest, I thought. I barely made it home without getting pecked most afternoons. After 2 weeks of being chased, I decided I had to do something about it. There had to be something I could do to stop the goose from trying to attack me. Just before heading off to school, I stopped in our chicken coop and grabbed a handful of cracked corn. I was determined to stop this goose from chasing me all the way to school. I got close to the spot, and sure enough, the goose came flying out of the bushes at me, squawking. I began running and dropping the cracked corn behind me. About halfway to my school, I noticed that the goose was slowing down. She was gobbling up the corn. So she is hungry, I thought. That afternoon, I went to the library and I read up on geese. I found out that they are in the same family as swans. Swans are beautiful, and they too are very protective of their babies. I learned that most of the geese in the United States were brought here from Canada, and because they were brought here, they didn't know about migration. So usually they stay in the same area their whole lives. I also found out that the goose chasing me was probably the daddy goose protecting his family. I learned a lot about geese that day. On the way home that day, I tossed the rest of the corn close to the bush, and instead of the goose chasing me, he came out and just pecked at the corn. I decided right there and then that I was going to take care of this goose and his family. So every day I brought something for the goose family: corn, seeds, clover, berries. My walks to and from school were much better. I fed the goose and was able to walk by without being chased. And then The most amazing thing happened about a month after my first encounter with the goose. It was just like every other day, walking to school. But when I got close to the bush, the goose came out and spread his wings wide and squawked really loud. I thought he was going to chase me like before. Instead, another goose came out from behind the bush. It was the mother. She opened her wings wide and squawked too. I tossed some berries and clover down for them, and suddenly 8 little baby geese flocked out to the food. Oh, they were so adorable, cheeping their little cheeks, pecking at the berries. The daddy goose was strutting around so proud. I backed away so as not to scare them, and I just watched them eat their berries and clover. When I got to school, I told Miss Martin all about my goose family. She was very impressed that I had taken the time to find a solution to my problem of being chased by the goose. You could have just ignored the problem, but you went out of your way to find a means for you both to get along, she told me. That experience taught me more than I realized. I learned that not everyone speaks the same language, but we can still communicate. I learned that everything is not always as it seems. I thought the goose was mean to chase me, but he was really just scared for his family. I learned that if you do a little research, you can find a solution to almost any problem. I believe that the ancestors from that goose family live there still. I wonder if they're chasing some other little girl now. Oh, Miss Lucev, thank you. That was a great story. Penelope gave Mrs. Lucev a big hug. You're welcome, Penelope, she answered. I'm glad you liked it. Oh, I did. I think it's been the most exciting story yet, she answered. What color flower would you like? I think I'll choose the gray one, she said, plucking it from Penelope's bouquet. It will remind me of those walks to school and the goose family. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Mrs. Lucev, for the awesome story, Penelope said, walking back to the manor. She found her mother having tea with Mrs. Coppola. Hi, Mrs. Coppola. I just heard a great story from Mrs. Lucev. I bet it was about that killer goose. It was. How did you know? She tells that story to all the children that visit, she answered. The moral of the story is to not jump to conclusions and first and foremost, be kind. I can see that, Penelope said. You all have the best stories here. I can't wait for my next visit. We should head home. Daddy's waiting for us, Mommy said, getting up. See you tomorrow, Mrs. Coppola. Bye, dear. Thank you for the tea. Penelope was still thinking about Mrs. Lucev's story when they were leaving. Hey, Mommy, do you think we can get a pet goose? Her mother just looked at her and smiled. The end. Well, I hope you enjoyed tonight's story. I enjoyed writing it and telling it to you. Don't forget to share my stories, and I'll see you again next week for another great grandma tale. Good night.